A 21-year-old walked into New York Fashion Week and did something that should not have been possible. She cracked the top 5, standing shoulder to shoulder with names the fashion industry has worshipped for decades. And she did it without ever stepping foot on a runway, without a single fashion credit to her name, and without anyone in that industry giving her permission to be there. She is not a model. She is not an influencer manufactured by a talent agency. She is a tennis player. Her name is Alex Eala. And if you think that sentence sounds like a mistake, you are not alone. Because plenty of people in that room were asking the exact same question. How does a girl from the Philippines, ranked outside the game's elite tier just a few years ago, end up eclipsing runway veterans at one of the most exclusive events on the fashion calendar? Stick with me because the answer to that question says a lot more about Alex than a 5-second scroll on Instagram ever could. And by the end of this, you'll understand why this moment is being treated as a turning point, not just for her wardrobe, but for her entire career. Let's rewind to the moment this all started snowballing, because the NYFW recognition didn't come out of nowhere. It was the final domino in a chain reaction that had already been building for weeks. Just days before Alex touched down in New York for the US Open, Nike quietly dropped a black t-shirt with her name on it. $42. Nothing flashy on paper. A subtle floral design across the front, her name stitched in script across the back, wrapped in more floral artwork alongside the swoosh and Nike's signature "Just Do It" line. It went live on August 18th, 2026. And then, within hours, not days, hours, it was gone. Sold out, completely wiped from Nike's shelves before most fans even had a chance to refresh the page. Now here's where it gets interesting, because sellouts happen all the time in sports merchandising, and on their own they don't necessarily mean much. What made this one different was the company Alex was keeping on that release day. Fashion writer Jessica Schiffer pointed out that Nike had dropped merchandise for several other players that same week. Carlos Alcaraz, Yannick Sinner, Aryna Sabalenka, 3 of the biggest names in the entire sport. A former world #1 among them, multiple Grand Slam champions between them. And their merchandise? Still sitting there, still available, still waiting for buyers while Alex's shirt had already vanished. Sit with that for a second. A 21-year-old who has yet to win a tour-level title outsold players who have literally defined this era of tennis. That is not a small thing. That is the kind of statistic that makes an entire industry stop and pay attention. But here's the twist that makes this story even messier, and honestly, more human. The shirt wasn't universally loved. Not even close. As the sellout news spread, so did a wave of criticism. Fans on Nike's own website left reviews begging the company to restock, sure, but plenty of others were less kind about the actual design. Comments started circulating, calling it low effort, questioning why a player generating this much buzz didn't get something more distinctive. One fan complaint that stuck out involved the color scheme itself. Dark lettering on a dark shirt, so subtle that some buyers said you could barely make out the design at all. And that created this bizarre contradiction that honestly tells you everything about where Alex's star power currently sits. People were criticizing the shirt with one breath and demanding Nike restock it with the next. That's not a normal reaction to merchandise. That's the reaction to a name that has become bigger than the product itself. By Wednesday afternoon, Nike's women's tennis storefront had already flagged the shirt as coming soon again, which tells you the company was scrambling to catch up with demand nobody fully predicted. Now, if this were just about one t-shirt, this would be a fun footnote and nothing more. But rewind a little further and you start to see this wasn't an isolated spike. It was the latest chapter in something that had been building all year. Before that shirt even existed, Nike had already unveiled Alex's US Open kit, and the centerpiece was a royal blue dress priced at $140 that had tennis fashion writers talking before she had struck a single ball at Flushing Meadows. Nike described it as a basketball-inspired design, built from recycled materials, with large mesh panels along the back and sides meant to echo basketball netting, all wrapped around a sleek racerback cut engineered to sit comfortably over a sports bra. Functionally, it's built with Nike's dry fit technology, so it's not just a fashion statement. It's designed to perform under the brutal heat and humidity of a New York summer tournament. But here's the detail that turned it from nice dress into cultural moment. That specific shade of royal blue immediately reminded fans of the blue found on the Philippine national flag. Nike never explicitly confirmed that connection in official messaging, but the timing, the styling, and Alex's own history of weaving her heritage into her on-court identity made the comparison almost impossible to ignore. And that heritage angle isn't some marketing afterthought bolted onto her image after the fact. It's been part of her story for a while now, and once you understand it, everything about this fashion rise clicks into place. Printed on her kits are Filipino phrases that carry real weight beyond decoration. One translates roughly to "what you plant, you will one day reap." The other reads, "once it grows, it cannot be stopped." These aren't throwaway slogans. They first appeared on her visor at her Wimbledon debut earlier this year, and now they've carried over onto her US Open dress, creating a kind of visual thread that connects tournament to tournament, season to season. At that same Wimbledon debut, Nike gave her a custom hair tie featuring the sampaguita, the national flower of the Philippines, and that flower wasn't a one-off either. It showed up again on an earlier Nike shirt she wore, one created in collaboration with Filipino artist Georgina Q. When Alex spoke about wearing these details during Wimbledon, she described it as deeply personal, saying it means a great deal to be able to wear pieces that carry parts of her culture, explaining that on one hand it's a tribute to where she comes from, and on the other, she simply finds the designs beautiful in their own right. That's not the kind of quote an athlete gives when a brand is just checking a diversity box. That's someone who has clearly had input into what goes on her body when she steps onto some of the biggest stages in the sport. So now picture the emotional layer underneath all of this. A 21-year-old from a country that has never produced a true tennis superstar on this global stage is walking out in Arthur Ashe Stadium wearing words in her own language, tied to a childhood, a family, a whole nation watching her represent them on camera in front of millions. That's the story Nike is quietly telling through fabric and stitching, whether or not they've said it outright. And it's working, because merchandise tied to that story is outselling players who have won majors. Let's talk about the bag, because if the shirt made headlines and the dress made a cultural statement, the bag is what truly convinced people Alex isn't just adjacent to the fashion world, she belongs in it. Before flying out to Canada earlier in August, Alex posted a casual outfit check on her Instagram story. Nothing dramatic on the surface, a plain white tee, relaxed purple pants, loafers, the kind of outfit anyone throws on for an airport run. But slung over her shoulder was a designer piece that fashion-savvy fans clocked almost instantly, a Chanel tote, believed to be from the French luxury house's Fall-Winter 2010 or 2011 collection. It's a plum-colored bag with Chanel's signature quilting, purple and white tweed woven into that unmistakable diamond pattern across a padded nylon exterior. Leather and chain straps, hardware matching the interlocking CC logo up front. Two spacious compartments, enough room based on her own photo for the oversized headphones she's known for wearing on her walk out to the court before matches. Here's the number that made people's jaws drop. Because this bag comes from a collection that's now well over a decade old, it's genuinely difficult to source. If you manage to find one on the resale market today, you're looking at a price tag starting around $12,500, which comes out to roughly 152,000 Philippine pesos. Alex herself has admitted in the past that she has a weakness for a good bag, and this piece is proof that it's not just a passing comment, it's a genuine, curated interest in fashion that predates all of this current attention. And this is where you start to realize her style isn't a single lane, it's a whole wardrobe philosophy that stretches in multiple directions at once. On one end, you've got that Chanel bag and airport casual streetwear. On the completely opposite end, you've got her embracing modern Filipiniana, a traditional style of dress from the Philippines in an ensemble designed by her own uncle, respected Filipino designer Alex Eala. That piece featured sculptural bolero sleeves, soft draping, clean architectural lines, a design that managed to honor formal Filipino craftsmanship while still looking completely at home on a global stage. Then there's the version of Alex who shows up to birthday celebrations in a flirtatious slip dress mixing florals, pastels, and animal prints, proving she's just as comfortable in playful vacation dressing as she is in polished, tailored elegance. Put those pieces side by side and you get someone whose personal style is genuinely varied, not manufactured by a stylist trying to build a brand, but something that looks lived in, personal, and authentically hers. So when New York Fashion Week's top 5 list dropped and her name was sitting right there next to industry veterans, it wasn't some fluke voted in by an algorithm. It was the natural conclusion of everything we just walked through. The sellout shirt, the flag blue dress, the cultural embroidery, the Chanel bag, the Filipiniana gown, all of it stacking on top of each other until the fashion world simply couldn't pretend she wasn't relevant anymore. And remember, this recognition landed just days after she touched down in New York for the US Open itself, which means the timing could not have been more loaded. She wasn't arriving in the city purely as an athlete anymore. She was arriving as someone the fashion world was actively watching. Now here's where this story stops being just a fun scroll through of outfits and turns into something with actual stakes. Because none of this fashion attention exists in a vacuum. It's layered directly on top of what's already been happening to her at tournaments all summer. Long before any of these Nike drops, Alex had already been drawing crowds that frankly don't make sense for a player at her current ranking and experience level. Practice sessions, not even real matches, have been turning into events in their own right, with fans showing up just to watch her hit balls before a tournament even officially begins. That demand has gotten strong enough that tournament organizers have repeatedly given her prime court assignments, even when it meant bumping higher ranked, more decorated players to smaller, less visible courts. Think about what that actually means. Organizers are making business decisions based on her drawing power, not strictly her ranking. That's the kind of leverage most players spend a decade trying to build, and it's showing up around her before she's even lifted a major trophy on the professional tour. So the real question heading into this US Open isn't just what will Alex wear? It's something much bigger. Can she carry both of these identities at once without either one dragging down the other? Because let's be honest, there's a real tension here. The more successful she becomes as a fashion figure, the more scrutiny follows her onto the court. Every match now becomes a referendum not just on her tennis, but on whether the attention is deserved, whether she can back it up with results at the sport's biggest stage. Flushing Meadows isn't just any tournament for her, either. This is the exact court where she won the US Open girls singles title back in 2022, at just 17 years old, and it's also the site of her first ever Grand Slam main draw win. This is a place that has already given her some of the most defining moments of her young career. Walking back in now, wrapped in this new wave of fashion attention, adds a completely different kind of pressure than the one she faced as a teenager chasing a junior title. Back then, she was an underdog with nothing to lose. Now she's stepping in as someone the entire sports and fashion world is watching simultaneously, and those two audiences don't always want the same thing from her. Here's what makes this genuinely fascinating rather than just another feel-good athlete story. Most players who cross over into fashion do it after their competitive careers are winding down, once the wins are already banked and the risk is minimal. Alex is doing it in real time, mid-career, while she's still fighting to climb the rankings and prove herself against players who've already won majors. That's a much riskier tightrope to walk. If her results dip even slightly this tournament, critics will be quick to say the off-court attention is a distraction. If she performs well, this fashion moment becomes part of a much bigger, much more compelling underdog narrative. A story about a young woman who managed to conquer two completely different industries at once, using her heritage as a through line connecting both of them. And that's really the heart of why this story resonates the way it does. It's not just about a sold-out t-shirt or a resale market handbag. It's about a 21-year-old who has figured out how to turn every piece of fabric she wears into a message. About where she comes from, about what she's building, about a phrase stitched onto a visor that says, once something grows, it cannot be stopped. Whether that phrase ends up describing her fashion rise, her tennis career, or both at the same time is the question everyone will be watching for as the US Open unfolds. One thing is already certain though, the tennis establishment can no longer treat this as a side story. A shirt that outsold merchandise from a former world number 1 and multiple Grand Slam champions doesn't happen by accident, and neither does a spot in New York Fashion Week's top 5. Alex has built something that extends well past a scoreboard, and now the entire sports world gets to watch whether she can carry both crowns into Arthur Ashe Stadium at the same time. So here's the real question worth sitting with as this tournament plays out. Does this level of attention lift her game, or does it become the heaviest weight she's ever had to carry on that court? We're about to find out, and given everything she's already pulled off this year, betting against her feels like a mistake nobody wants to make.